In the heart of Willowbrook, a small town where everybody knew everybody, there was a tiny patch of land that had seen better days. This was the Willowbrook Community Garden, and it was in trouble. The once vibrant flowers were wilting, the vegetables were small and sad-looking, and weeds seemed to pop up faster than anyone could pull them out. But 10-year-old Lily Martinez still loved the garden. Every day after school, she would check on her little plot of sunflowers. But lately, her beloved flowers looked just as droopy as she felt when she saw them. "Don't worry," she whispered to a particularly sad-looking sunflower. "I'll figure out how to make you happy again." Lily didn't know that someone else was listening to her promise. Standing in the corner of the garden, hidden behind an overgrown bush, was a small garden gnome. His red hat was faded, his blue jacket was chipped, and his once cheery smile had long ago been worn away by wind and rain. But his eyes twinkled with a secret. As the sun began to set and Lily reluctantly headed home, the gnome's eyes followed her. He waited patiently as the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle. Then, just as the town clock struck midnight, something magical happened. With a little wiggle of his toes and a shake of his head, the gnome suddenly sprang to life. He stretched his arms and legs, cracked his tiny knuckles, and let out a big yawn. Oh my, he said in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. "This garden needs some serious help." The gnome, whose name was Gus, though nobody had called him that in a very long time, hopped down from his perch and hurried over to Lily's sunflowers. "Now then," he said, gently touching a drooping leaf, "what seems to be the problem here?" To Gus' surprise, the sunflower answered. In a soft, whispery voice it said, "We are too thirsty. The soil is too dry." Gus nodded knowingly. I see. Well, we can't have that, can we?" He scampered over to the garden shed and, with a bit of magic and a lot of determination, managed to drag out a watering can twice his size. It took him most of the night, but Gus watered every single plant in the garden. As the sky began to lighten, Gus hurried back to his spot. With a final wiggle and a shake, he became still once more, just a simple garden gnome. But there was a new sparkle in his eye and the ghost of a smile on his worn face. The next afternoon, Lily raced to the garden after school. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her sunflowers standing tall and proud. But how, she wondered aloud, it hasn't rained. She looked around the garden and noticed that all the plants looked a little better. Even the gnome in the corner seemed to be smiling at her. Lily shook her head. "I must be imagining things," she said to herself. That night, Gus came to life again. And this time, he tackled the weeds that were choking out the vegetables. With tiny but strong hands, he pulled out weed after weed, humming a little gnome song as he worked. When Lily came to the garden the next day, she was even more surprised. "The weeds are gone," she exclaimed. "But who could have done this?" Night after night, Gus worked his magic in the garden. He composted, pruned, and even sweet-talked the earthworms into helping aerate the soil. And day after day, Lily and the other gardeners were amazed by the incredible transformation. Word spread quickly in Willowbrook. Soon, people were coming from all over town to see the miracle garden, but no one could explain how it had happened. No one, that is, except for old Mrs. Havisham. She lived in a blue house across from the garden and suffered from insomnia. One night, unable to sleep, she glanced out her window and saw a most extraordinary sight. A little gnome running around the garden with a watering can. The next day, Mrs. Havisham told everyone about what she had seen, but nobody believed her. "A magical gnome?" they laughed. "You must have been dreaming." But Lily wasn't so sure. She remembered how the gnome had seemed to smile at her. That afternoon, she went to the garden and sat down right in front of Gus. "If you really are magical," she whispered, "I just want to say thank you. You've made so many people happy." For a moment, Lily thought she saw the gnome's eyes twinkle, but then she blinked, and he was just a regular old garden gnome again. That night, Gus was extra excited to get to work. He had big plans for the garden, but as he hopped down from his perch, he was startled to see Lily sitting there, wide awake and staring right at him. "I knew it," Lily exclaimed. "You are magical." Gus froze, not sure what to do. He hadn't been discovered in... well, he couldn't remember how long it had been. Please, don't be afraid, Lily said softly. I won't tell anyone. I just want to help. Gus relaxed a little. Well, he said in his leafy voice, I suppose I could use an assistant. Gardening is hard work, even for a magical gnome. From that night on, Lily and Gus were a team. Every evening, Lily would sneak out to the garden, and together they would work through the night, making the garden more beautiful than ever. But as summer turned to fall, Gus began to worry. Winter is coming, he told Lily one night, and I'm afraid I won't be able to keep the garden alive in the cold. Lily frowned. She couldn't bear the thought of the garden dying after all their hard work. Suddenly, she had an idea. We need to get the whole town involved, she said. If everyone helps, we can protect the garden through the winter. The next day, Lily went door to door, telling everyone how much work had gone into the garden, except for the part about Gus, of course, and how it needed protection for the winter. She was persuasive, and soon the entire town was on board. People donated old sheets and tarps to cover delicate plants. The local hardware store provided stakes and ties to secure everything, and on the first truly cold day, the whole town gathered to winterize the garden. As Lily watched her neighbors working together, laughing and sharing hot chocolate, she felt a warmth inside that had nothing to do with her steaming mug. She glanced over at Gus, still in his corner, and could have sworn she saw him wink. That winter was one of the coldest Willowbrook had ever seen, but inside its protective coverings, the garden slept peacefully, waiting for spring. When the first warm days arrived, the whole town gathered again to uncover the garden. To everyone's delight, the plants had survived. As people cheered and hugged, Lily slipped away to talk to Gus. We did it, she whispered. The garden is safe, and now the whole town loves it as much as we do. Gus's painted-on smile seemed to widen. We did indeed, he said softly. But remember, Lily, the real magic wasn't me. It was you bringing the town together. Lily blushed. Maybe, she said, but I couldn't have done it without you. From that day on, the Willowbrook community garden flourished like never before. People came from far and wide to see its beauty and learn its secrets. And while they all remarked on the lovely gnome in the corner, only Lily knew the truth about the real guardian of the garden. As for Gus, he still came to life each night, but now, instead of working alone, he would often just open his eyes towards the townsfolk, working late into the evening to tend their beloved garden. And that, he thought, as he watched the fireflies dance among the flowers, was the most magical thing of all.